Hi everyone, we're the team from Queensland Health, and because of that we would like to declare or raise a potential conflict of interest for this challenge, which is challenge 1. Our proposal is of a glass half full, so transparency, a nudge towards transparency in a data-anxious world. So I would like to respectfully acknowledge the traditional owners of the many lands from which we join today, and elders past, present and emerging, as well as colleagues of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander heritage who are with us. Our team is made up of Duncan, Jacky, myself Leah and Rebecca.
Thanks guys. So look, acknowledging that this particular challenge has a huge impact on a broad range of stakeholders, each with their own unique perspective and interests in finding a resolution. Now, unfortunately, given the short timeframe we have today, we can't address all of them appropriately. So we have chosen to target our focus on a core frequent user group for Queensland Health, which is the clinical researcher. For feasibility of a shorter time frame for implementation, we have chosen to consider ways in which we could leverage our existing operational framework, the glass half full. The methodology that really underpins our proposal was actually informed by Rebecca's talk around the customer journey mapping process and considering ways in which we can add our value proposition. So look, at a high level, we did utilise this concept in the way that we could map our own customer journey against the existing data governance access pathway, and then we overlaid that with known use cases. Now, in health, a use case provides the experience or perspective and the challenges experienced by a particular stakeholder, and in this instance, the clinical researcher navigating through the path and trying to achieve the goal of accessing the data. And as part of this, we consider the resulting system behaviours and responses to that request. So collectively, this enabled us to identify the key pain points in the existing process and find potential opportunities where we could optimise, streamline and help improve transparency in the decision-making process. Ultimately, we feel that this can actually assist in improving the trust and confidence in the process by all of the stakeholder groups.
So our customer profile that we've chosen is a clinical researcher, and we've assumed that it will be a senior one at that. So that's someone that is actually well versed in the research processes, knows how to navigate the Queensland Health system and understands what sort of data we actually hold, as well as having key contacts in areas that matter for them to know how to navigate through all of this. And when we describe the journey to you, try to imagine if you're someone who don't actually know any of these things, try and get your way through. So what we showed on the slide here is actually the many layers that inform our data governance processes. And what we'll focus on today is actually just the bottom 3 layers, where there's going to be some front of shop interactions with our customer, as well as some of the back end work that would help us.
Thank you. With that many layers of government, who wants to come work for Queensland Health? I guess we've really put this slide together to show you there is a huge depth in terms of the framework of data governance, and there's already a huge amount of data governance in place. But the red part down the bottom is actually where we need to do a bunch of work. And the red part down the bottom is the bit that actually puts data in the hands of our researchers. So that's why it's important that we consider the entire data governance journey. And taking this perspective of using a user journey has really opened up our eyes to consider this from a different lens. So thank you for having us as part of this process. We also want to talk about the co-design principles. So we already implement co-design with the green sections there of this drawing. We have our technical reference groups and our clinical reference groups. Part of this conversation today is about expanding that to a broader audience to take on more perspectives, which you think will be better outcomes. So here's the sort of overall journey of a data proposition. Generally, a clinician comes up with a fantastic idea, they flesh it over with their colleagues, they might take some clinical network groups, they look at existing research. Before that, it gets turned into a proposal which can be taken to an ethics approval group. So usually from there, we don't have that prioritisation step. Usually the next step in a journey is it goes straight to the data custodian, then it goes in a queue for someone in the data teams to start picking it up and turn that into a data output. What we think is that that's not particularly transparent, it's not particularly democratic, and it's very hard for the public to have confidence that that process is really being done effectively. So that's where prioritisation comes in. We're talking about prioritisation here as a framework which is going to be transparent, it's public, it's visible to the public. It's going to be something which will document the things we're working on, the things we're planning on working on, and these types of documents also feed into those other things, such as your informed consent document. So this is a cohesive environment which works in with both the topics, really. So and we'll talk more about that prioritisation framework. Also, I guess, we've taken a really different perspective, actually, from one of the other groups. We're talking about wayfinders, and wayfinders in our example are people. The main tool that we have in Queensland Health, as specialists in this field, is the people we have, and we underpin it with good processes and documentation. But actually what we want is a bunch of skilled people who can work across the data spectrum, from researchers to medical to the actual data provisioning, to infrastructure, working with HHSs, really working across the broad spectrum. And we'll talk more about wayfinders as we progress. So why is prioritisation important? Well, the main thing is we can't actually do all the great ideas that our clinicians come up with. We have so many great ideas out there, we have to prioritise some. And our data is big and complex. So this is our clinical event table from the IEMR. We're going to have, by the end of this year, 50 billion rows of data. That's heart rate observations, results that have come back into the system, 50 billion data points. That's complex. Getting data out of that is hard, and it requires specialty. And that's really the end product of what all this is supposed to do, is get the data out of the clinical event table. That's our goal. Also, the power of this is I pulled that together last night in 20 minutes because I have access to the database. So part of the power of this is empowering the right people to have the right skills to be able to deliver on data governance. So the data delivery pipeline, let's have a look at the data delivery pipeline. So the specification component is really key, and what we're hoping is that by improving the overall data flow, including from the proposition and understanding what the output will be, we get better specification from our researchers. The data exploration is actually going into the IEMR and looking at where do clinicians document this thing, and then how do we spit it out into rows and rows and rows of data. That requires clinicians and it requires technical people like me to be working hand in hand to deliver on those outcomes. Then we do data validation, which is really critical because that makes sure we're telling the right story and we're giving the right information to researchers. Then we can get to a process where we can data extract, we can validate, and we can spit it out as an output. How long does that take? Well, for something simple, it takes a day or two. For something really complex, that can take up to 6 months, which is why we want to get that specification part right at the start. Because if you don't, you can go through 6 months, have the wrong data coming out the other end, and you go back through another process that's going to take you another 3 months. And you've got to hope you've still got the bandwidth left for your approval to still be up there in a prioritisation phase. So specifically, what are the nudges that we're looking at? I guess we've spoken about the people that are wayfinders. These are the people who are participating in the actual co-design of the process, but more importantly, they're there so that researchers don't have to become legal specialists. Researchers don't have to become technical specialists in data outputs, in visualisation. The wayfinders are there to be that mesh that sits between all of the complexities that makes up big data, that makes up great data outputs. So we propose that there's really specialist people that get invested in by Queensland Health to really pave that pathway. The prioritisation piece we've spoken about, that's about transparency, it's about confidence. It's a confidence of the public, it's confidence of our clinicians, it's confidence in HHS executives. For us, it's important we've got the confidence of the DG and the DDG. They're really important initiatives. And I think also that BETA gave us this great example of data governance on a page. We need to be able to tell that story which everyone can consume in a simple way on a page, so we all talk the same story with the same base. And I guess to really highlight why this is also important for confidence and trust is if this goes wrong. So if at the end of our project we end up spitting out the wrong data, and instead of giving data for one facility, we give data to all facilities, we just had a massive privacy breach. The minister knows about it, HHS executives know about it, we probably need to tell the patients. We've lost the confidence of our entire stakeholder group, and that's why dealing with this topic deals with the entire stakeholder audience, keeps legal off your back. So I guess we did want to finish. One of my favourite academics suggested I should be using good philosophical quotes to emphasise my points. So data governance can make you sparkle. It can take you so far. Just don't let up. Hope all of you know that report quote. Thank you.